There is a town in the Namib Desert where sand dunes have eaten through the front doors, filled the hallways, and now rest at window height inside what were once the grandest homes in Africa. Wallpaper peels from the walls. A bowling alley sits perfectly intact under a foot of sand. Somewhere in a ruined hospital, the housing frame of the Southern Hemisphere's first X-ray machine still stands. A machine that was installed not entirely to heal people, but to catch them stealing. This is Kolmanskop, and the story of how it rose, and how it fell, and why it is still technically inside a forbidden zone today, is one of the stranger chapters in the history of human greed. The Namib Desert in southern Namibia is one of the oldest on Earth, geologically speaking, somewhere in the range of 55 million years old. It has watched a great many things come and go. But even by its standards, what happened at Kolmanskop between 1908 and 1956 was unusual. In the span of a single human lifetime, a town was built, became arguably the wealthiest place per capita on the planet, was hollowed out, and was then simply handed back to the sand, furniture still inside, doors left open. To understand how that happened, you have to go back to a specific evening in April 1908. A railway worker named Zacharias Lewala was doing one of the least glamorous jobs in colonial southern Africa, shoveling sand off the tracks of a railway line being built through the desert between the port town of Lüderitz and the interior. The Namib was then, as now, constantly trying to bury anything humans placed on its surface. The sand never stopped moving. Lula's job was to keep pushing it back. At some point during that shift, he noticed something different in the material he was moving. A stone, catching the low evening light in a way that ordinary desert grit does not. He picked it up, looked at it, and brought it to his supervisor, a German railway inspector named August Stoch. Stoch had previously worked near the diamond mines of Kimberley in South Africa. He knew immediately what he was looking at. Lewala was not paid or rewarded for the find. That fact is documented, unambiguous, and worth sitting with for a moment, because everything that followed, the town, the wealth, the empire of diamonds in the desert, began with that man, on that shift, with that stone in his hand. Stoch, meanwhile, quietly resigned his position, secured mining claims across roughly 75 square kilometers around the discovery site, and began to get very, very rich. Word spread quickly despite early attempts to contain it. Within weeks, prospectors were swarming the area, and what they found strained belief. The diamonds were not buried deep underground in hard rock. They were lying on the surface. Early accounts describe men picking them up off the desert floor by the handful, filling jam jars with them, working by moonlight because the stones were bright enough to spot after dark. In the first 6 years of mining operations alone, the region produced approximately 5 million carats. By 1912, what had been empty desert 4 years earlier had become a functioning town. Kolmanskop. The name itself comes from a transport driver named Johnny Coleman who had been caught in a sandstorm here years before and was forced to abandon his ox wagon on a low hill, leaving a landmark that locals began calling Coleman's Hill, or Kolmanskop in Afrikaans. The name of a man's misfortune became the name of a place that would mint fortunes. And the German colonists who ran it built the town with an ambition that still seems almost hallucinatory given the surroundings. They were not building a camp. They were not building a temporary extraction outpost. They were building, as precisely as resources allowed, a replica of a German town in one of the most inhospitable places on the African continent. Building materials were shipped from Germany. The homes on what became informally known as Millionaire's Row were 2-story stone mansions with verandas, ornate interiors, and brightly painted walls. There was a hospital, a school, a post office, a casino, a ballroom, a theater, a pub, a bakery, a butcher who specialized in Viennese sausages, and a bowling alley. There was a power station, an ice factory, and a saltwater swimming pool. Opera singers and orchestras were brought in from Europe to perform in the concert hall. 2 firsts belonged to Kolmanskop that still stand as historical facts. It was the site of the first tram line in Africa, a system that carried both residents and diamonds down to the port at Lüderitz. And it housed the first X-ray machine in the entire southern hemisphere, installed in the town's hospital. That X-ray machine deserves a closer look. On the surface, it was a medical instrument, and the Kolmanskop Hospital was, by contemporary standards, genuinely advanced. But the machine served a second purpose that tells you something important about the social architecture of this place. Workers were x-rayed before they were allowed to leave town to confirm they had not swallowed diamonds. Before the machine arrived, the method had been cruder. Workers suspected of smuggling were held in quarantine for several days until any ingested stones had, by natural process, passed through their bodies. The X-ray simply made the surveillance faster. Some workers tried to get around it. Carrier pigeons were used to smuggle diamonds out of the Sperrgebiet. There is an account of one such attempt failing when a pigeon, weighed down by its contraband, stopped to rest mid-flight. Security found the bird. They followed it. They found the smugglers. After that, owning carrier pigeons in the restricted zone became illegal. The Sperrgebiet, the word means forbidden zone in German, was the legal framework that made Kolmanskop possible, and also contained within it the seeds of the town's eventual collapse. In September 1908, just months after the first diamond was found, the German colonial government declared a vast restricted zone stretching roughly 360 kilometers along the coast and 100 kilometers inland. Entry required official authorization. Ordinary prospectors were pushed out. The mining rights were consolidated and reserved for a single Berlin-based company. The indigenous Nama and Baster communities whose land this had been were displaced from the zone entirely. Those who remained were employed as contract laborers, housed in cramped compounds on the outskirts of town, separate, deliberately, from the German mansions at the center. By 1912, Kolmanskop was producing over 1 million carats of diamonds per year, roughly 11 to 12% of total global diamond production. The per capita wealth of the town's small European population was, by some accounts, the highest of any settlement on Earth at that time. Then came the first blow. World War I broke out in 1914, and the effects reached even here, deep in the Namib. Diamond markets contracted. The colonial administration of German Southwest Africa collapsed when South African forces took the territory. German-era mining gave way to South African administration. Production slowed. The war years cut output to near zero. The town recovered somewhat in the early 1920s, but it never regained its prior momentum. And then in 1928 came the event that sealed Kolmanskop's fate permanently. Prospectors working to the south discovered something extraordinary. The beach terraces near the Orange River, hundreds of kilometers down the coast, were absolutely saturated with diamonds, richer deposits than anything that had been found around Kolmanskop. The diamonds there were also larger and of higher quality. By the early 1930s, the fields around Kolmanskop were nearing exhaustion. The machinery began to be dismantled and moved south. Families followed the work. By 1938, most of the industrial infrastructure had been relocated. What is remarkable is the manner of the leaving. People did not pack everything they owned. They took what they needed and left the rest. Furniture in the houses, equipment in the workshops, personal effects in the rooms. Whether this was because they intended to return and simply never did, or because the economics of transporting household goods through the desert made it impractical, is not entirely clear. The result, either way, is that Kolmanskop became a kind of time capsule. The last residents departed between 1956 and 1960. The desert, patient as ever, began moving back in. The process by which the Namib reclaims a building is worth understanding, because it explains the visual that makes Kolmanskop so strange and arresting. The sand does not arrive catastrophically. It works slowly, through every crack and gap, through keyholes and broken window panes, and the slight warping of door frames that no longer seal perfectly. Dunes accumulate on the windward side of a structure and then crest over it, depositing material inside. The heavier furniture, wardrobes, bathtubs, iron bed frames, stays roughly where it was left as the sand fills around it. The result is rooms that look almost inhabited, except that the floor is now a dune, and the window that once looked out onto a garden now looks onto another dune just on the other side of the glass. In 1980, the touristic potential of the site was recognized, and selective restoration work began. Some buildings were excavated and stabilized. Further restoration efforts continued into the 1990s. Today, Kolmanskop operates as an open-air museum. Guided tours run most days of the week. Visitors come from around the world, and photographers in particular treat the site as something close to sacred. The specific quality of light inside those sand-filled rooms, particularly in the early morning hours, has made it one of the most photographed locations on the African continent. But the Sperrgebiet is still there. Now formally designated as Chow Cave National Park, declared in 2008, the zone covering approximately 26,000 square kilometers along Namibia's southwestern coast still requires a permit to enter. Diamonds are still being mined in its southern reaches around Oranjemund by Namib, a joint venture between the Namibian government and De Beers. The legal boundary that was drawn in September 1908 to control those first scattered surface stones still, in its evolved form, controls access to the land today. Zacharias Lewala, the man who found the stone that started all of it, was never compensated. August Stoch, who took that stone from him and knew what to do with it, became one of the wealthiest men in Africa. The town that grew from that moment employed hundreds of contract laborers in conditions of tight control and racial stratification, while a small population of German residents enjoyed a standard of living that was, by any measure, extraordinary for its time and place. None of that wealth stayed. The mansions stand empty. The sand is in the ballroom. The bowling alley waits under its dune. The X-ray machine housing remains in the hospital, stripped now of its components, pointed at nothing. The Namib Desert is 55 million years old. Kolmanskop lasted 48 years. In the long accounting of this particular stretch of desert, that is barely a moment, a brief, violent interruption of wealth and exploitation and ambition, and then silence, and then sand. There are places on Earth that exist as reminders of how quickly something can be built, and how much more quickly it can be taken back. Kolmanskop is one of them. It is the kind of place that stays with you, not because of the grandeur of what was built there, but because of how completely the desert refused to remember it.